Seth Meyers paced backstage, reviewing his notes with his production team. The show's writers had prepared what they considered clever questions about Ice Cube's transition from N.W.A. to Hollywood, sprinkled with their trademark brand of humor that often walked the line between playful ribbing and something more pointed. The ratings had been slipping lately, and the pressure from network executives was mounting. They needed moments that would generate buzz, clips that would go viral, content that would get people talking. As the show went live, Seth delivered his opening monologue with his characteristic smirk, making jokes about current events and celebrities, with the kind of casual dismissiveness that his audience had come to expect. The crowd laughed on cue, but there was an edge to his delivery tonight, a sharpness that seemed to cut deeper than usual. When it came time to introduce Ice Cube, Seth's smile felt forced as he welcomed the legendary rapper and actor to thunderous applause. Ice Cube walked out with his usual confident stride, but those who knew him well might have noticed a slight tension in his shoulders, a wariness in his eyes that suggested he was already picking up on something in the atmosphere. The interview started innocuously enough. Seth asked about Ice Cube's latest projects, his family, and his continued success in both music and film. Ice Cube answered with his typical straightforward honesty, sharing anecdotes and insights that the audience seemed to genuinely appreciate. But Seth's questions began to take on a different tone, becoming more pointed, more confrontational. "No, I've always been curious about something," Seth said, leaning forward with that look he got when he thought he was being particularly clever. "You went from writing songs about fighting the power to making family comedies. Some people might call that selling out. How do you reconcile that transformation?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Ice Cube's expression didn't change immediately, but those watching closely could see his jaw tighten slightly. He'd fielded questions like this before, but there was something in Seth's tone, something condescending and dismissive that made this feel different. "Selling out?" Ice Cube repeated, his voice measured but carrying an undertone that made the studio audience shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Let me ask you something, Seth. When you went from SNL to hosting a late-night show, were you selling out to corporate interests, or were you just evolving as an artist and businessman?" Seth's laugh was a little too loud, a little too forced. "Well, that's different. I'm not exactly known for revolutionary music that challenged the system. No, you're known for making jokes about people who actually did challenge the system. While you collected paychecks from the same corporations we were fighting against," Ice Cube shot back, his voice still controlled but with an edge that cut through the studio's artificial warmth. The audience fell silent. This wasn't the playful banter they were used to seeing on late-night television. This felt real, uncomfortable, dangerous. Seth's smile faltered for just a moment before he tried to regain his footing. "Come on, that's not fair. We're just trying to entertain people here." Entertain people by what? By diminishing the struggles that real people went through? By turning everything into a punchline for your predominantly white audience to laugh at? Ice Cube's voice was rising now, and the cameras captured every micro-expression of his growing frustration. Seth realized he was losing control of the interview, but instead of backing down or changing course, he doubled down with the kind of privileged arrogance that had gotten him into trouble before. "Look, I think you're taking this way too seriously. We're just having a conversation here." "Just having a conversation?" Ice Cube stood up slightly in his chair, his legendary intensity beginning to show. "Nah, man, you've been taking subtle shots at me and people like me for years, hiding behind your jokes and your audience's laughter. You think because you smile while you do it, it doesn't count as disrespect." The studio had gone completely silent except for the hum of cameras and the barely audible whispers of crew members who knew they were witnessing something unprecedented. Seth's face had gone pale, but his ego wouldn't let him back down now. "Look, Ice Cube, I think you're misunderstanding the nature of comedy," Seth said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone that made his privilege so transparent. Sometimes we have to poke fun at things to make them more accessible to mainstreams, audiences. It's not personal. Ice Cube's eyes flashed with a dangerous intensity that anyone familiar with his music would recognize. This was the same fire that had powered songs like "Fuck the Police" and countless other tracks that had challenged authority and called out injustice. Not personal? Man, you've been making it personal for years. Every time you make a joke about rappers being violent, every time you mock hip-hop culture, every time you reduce our art to stereotypes for your audience to laugh at, you're making it personal. The audience sat frozen, caught between fascination and discomfort. This wasn't the scripted drama they were used to consuming. This was raw, unfiltered confrontation playing out in real time, and they could feel the electricity in the air. Seth's production team huddled behind the cameras, frantically gesturing to each other. Some wanted to cut to commercial, others insisted they stay with the moment. The network executives watching from their offices were torn between horror and excitement, knowing that controversy meant ratings, even if it came at a cost. "I think you're being overly sensitive," Seth continued, digging himself deeper into a hole he didn't even realize he was creating. "Comedy has always pushed boundaries. That's what makes it effective. If we can't laugh at ourselves, what's the point? Laugh at ourselves?" Ice Cube's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried more weight than if he had shouted. "When's the last time you made a joke about privileged white hosts who think they can lecture black artists? About sensitivity? When's the last time you turned the mirror on yourself and your industry?" Seth's nervous laughter sounded hollow in the tense studio. "Come on, I make fun of myself all the time." "No, you make fun of your awkwardness, your appearance, safe little things that don't challenge the system that put you in that chair," Ice Cube shot back, his finger now pointing directly at Seth. "You never joke about the real issues. You never question why late-night television is dominated by people who look like you, talking to audiences that look like you, about people who don't look like you." The cameras captured every moment of Seth's growing discomfort as he realized he had severely underestimated his guest. This wasn't going according to any script, and his usual deflection tactics weren't working. The charming smile that had carried him through countless interviews was starting to crack under pressure. "I don't think that's entirely fair," Seth stammered, his confidence evaporating. "We've had plenty of diverse guests on the show." "Having diverse guests isn't the same as having diverse perspectives," Ice Cube countered, his voice gaining momentum. "You bring us on to promote our projects, ask us a few safe questions, maybe throw in a joke at our expense, and then send us on our way. You never actually engage with the real issues we care about, the things we've spent our careers fighting for." The studio audience began to murmur among themselves, some nodding in agreement with Ice Cube's words, others looking uncomfortable with the confrontation unfolding before them. The carefully constructed atmosphere of manufactured entertainment was crumbling, replaced by something far more authentic and unsettling. Seth tried to regain control by changing the subject. "Well, let's talk about your new movie then. I'm sure our audience would love to hear about that." But Ice Cube wasn't about to let him off the hook. "Nah, we're not done here. You started this conversation by questioning my integrity, by suggesting I sold out. Now you want to run away when I'm explaining to you exactly what selling out looks like." The tension in the studio was palpable now. Crew members stood frozen at their positions, unsure whether to continue filming or intervene. The audience held its collective breath, sensing that they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. "You sit in that chair every night," Ice Cube continued, his voice steady but charged with decades of frustration, "making jokes about people who actually put their careers on the line to speak truth to power, while you've never risked anything. You've never challenged the system that feeds you. You've never used your platform for anything more meaningful than cheap laughs and corporate-approved commentary." Seth's face flushed red as he felt the weight of the accusation. His writers had prepared him for promotional softballs, not a full-scale indictment of his career and character. That's completely unfair. I've tackled plenty of serious issues on this show. Like what? Ice Cube demanded, leaning forward in his chair with the intensity of a prosecutor cross-examining a hostile witness. Making fun of politicians everyone already agrees are ridiculous? That's not brave, that's profitable. Where were you when black artists were being blacklisted for speaking out? Where was your voice when the industry was systematically excluding our perspectives? The studio lights seemed hotter now, and sweat began to bead on Seth's forehead. He could feel the interview slipping completely out of his control, but his pride wouldn't let him concede any ground. I think you're being incredibly unfair. Comedy isn't activism. Exactly. Ice Cube's voice boomed through the studio, causing several audience members to visibly flinch. That's exactly the problem. You hide behind comedy when it's convenient, but you use your platform to shape opinions and perpetuate stereotypes. You can't have it both ways. Behind the cameras, the production team was in full panic mode. The director kept signaling for a commercial break, but Seth stubbornly refused to acknowledge the cues. His ego had taken over completely, and he was determined to win this battle of words, even as it became increasingly clear that he was outmatched. I resent the implication that I'm some kind of racist, Seth said, his voice rising defensively. I've always been supportive of diversity in entertainment. Ice Cube's laugh was cold and humorless. Supportive? You think booking black guests to make jokes about us is support? You think reducing our culture to punchlines for your audience's entertainment is support? The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. Many were filming with their phones despite the show's policies against recording. They knew they were witnessing television history, a moment of raw confrontation that would be dissected and analyzed for years. You want to know what real support looks like? Ice Cube continued, his voice gaining power. It's using your platform to amplify our voices, not mock them. It's questioning why the entertainment industry looks the way it does, not just accepting it and profiting from it. It's having the courage to challenge your own audience's preconceptions, not just feeding them what they want to hear. Seth tried desperately to regain his footing. Look, I think we're getting off track here. This is supposed to be entertainment. Entertainment for who? Ice Cube shot back immediately. For your predominantly white upper-middle-class audience that feels comfortable laughing at black culture from a safe distance? That's not entertainment. That's exploitation. The words hit Seth like physical blows. He could see his career flashing before his eyes, but his wounded pride pushed him to make one final catastrophic mistake. I think you're taking this way too personally. Maybe if you weren't so angry all the time, you'd see that we're actually on the same side. The studio fell into a silence so complete that the hum of the air conditioning became audible. Ice Cube's expression shifted from frustrated to genuinely dangerous, the kind of look that had intimidated everyone from record executives to movie producers throughout his career. Angry? Ice Cube's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of thunder. You think I'm angry? Man, you don't even understand what you just said, do you? Seth realized immediately that he had crossed a line, but it was too late to take the words back. The damage was done, and everyone in the studio could feel the temperature drop several degrees. You just used the oldest, most tired stereotype in the book, Ice Cube continued, his composure somehow making his words more terrifying than if he had shouted. The angry black man. You couldn't engage with my arguments, so you dismissed me as just another angry black guy who doesn't know how to take a joke. The audience began to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Some were shaking their heads in disbelief at Seth's comment, while others looked genuinely shocked by the turn the conversation had taken. That's not what I meant, Seth protested weakly, but his voice lacked conviction. Even he knew how his words had sounded. That's exactly what you meant, Ice Cube replied, standing up from his chair with fluid, controlled movement that somehow felt more threatening than any aggressive gesture could have been. And that's exactly the problem. When we challenge you, when we point out the hypocrisy and the double standards, You dismiss us as angry instead of actually listening to what we're saying." The studio audience was completely captivated, some leaning forward in their seats, others covering their mouths in shock. They could sense that something historic was about to happen, something that would be replayed and analyzed countless times in the days to come. Seth scrambled for damage control, his media training finally kicking in through his panic. "Ice Cube, I apologize if my words came across wrong. That's not what I intended to convey." But Ice Cube was beyond accepting hollow apologies. His years of experience in the entertainment industry had taught him to recognize insincere damage control when he heard it. "Save it, man. Your intention was crystal clear. You can't handle being called out, so you fall back on the same tired playbook that's been used to silence black voices for decades." The cameras captured every micro-expression, every gesture, as Ice Cube began to remove his microphone with deliberate, measured movements. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone watching. He was literally disconnecting from Seth's platform. "You know what the real tragedy is?" Ice Cube continued, his voice carrying the weight of profound disappointment. "You had a chance tonight to actually learn something, to grow as a person and as a host. Instead, you doubled down on your ignorance and proved every point I was trying to make." Seth made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Please, let's sit down and finish this conversation properly. I'm sure we can work this out." Ice Cube's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Work it out? Man, there's nothing to work out. You've shown me exactly who you are tonight, and you've shown your audience too. The only question now is whether they're paying attention." The production team behind the cameras was in complete chaos. Some were frantically gesturing for security, others were signaling to cut the feed. But no one seemed to know the right protocol for a situation that had never occurred before in the show's history. "You sit here every night thinking you're better than the people you make jokes about," Ice Cube said, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent studio. "But tonight, you've shown everyone that you're exactly what's wrong with this industry. You're a privileged gatekeeper who thinks his platform gives him the right to judge and diminish people who've actually fought for something meaningful." Seth's face had gone ashen, and his hands were visibly shaking as he gripped his interview cards. "Ice Cube, please. I think there's been a misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding was mine," Ice Cube replied, now completely disconnected from his microphone and standing at full height. "I thought I was coming on a show hosted by a professional. Instead, I walked into an ambush by someone who thinks casual disrespect passes for comedy." The audience began to murmur among themselves, some nodding in agreement with Ice Cube's assessment, others looking shocked by the complete breakdown of what was supposed to be light entertainment. Several people were openly filming with their phones, knowing they were witnessing a moment that would define both men's careers. "You want to know the difference between us, Seth?" Ice Cube asked, his voice now carrying the authority of someone who had commanded respect for decades. "When I was coming up, we had to earn our platform. We had to prove ourselves against real opposition, real resistance. You were handed yours because you fit a certain image, because you were safe, because you would never really challenge the people who sign your paychecks." With that devastating assessment, Ice Cube began walking toward the edge of the interview area. The cameras followed his every step as he moved with the confidence of a man who knew he had just delivered a masterclass in how to handle disrespect. "This interview is over," Ice Cube announced, his words echoing through the stunned studio. "I came here to promote my work and have a respectful conversation. Instead, I got subjected to the same condescending attitude that black artists have been dealing with for decades. I won't be part of that anymore." Seth made one final, pathetic attempt to stop him. "Ice Cube, wait! Don't leave like this!" Ice Cube paused at the edge of the set and turned back to face Seth one last time. The look he gave him was withering, the kind of stare that had intimidated everyone from gang members to corporate executives throughout his legendary career. "You had your chance to be better than this," Ice Cube said with finality. You chose to be exactly what I expected you to be." With that, he walked off the set, leaving Seth sitting alone in his chair, surrounded by a dead silent studio and the wreckage of his reputation. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of Seth's humiliation as he sat there, unable to process what had just happened to his carefully constructed image. The incident exploded across social media within minutes, with clips of the confrontation going viral and sparking intense debates about respect, privilege, and accountability in the entertainment industry. Seth's ratings plummeted as viewers abandoned his show in droves, while Ice Cube's stock rose even higher as people praised his refusal to tolerate disrespect. The confrontation became a defining moment that highlighted the importance of genuine respect and professionalism in entertainment, proving that authentic voices would no longer accept being diminished for the comfort of privileged hosts and their audiences.